This is a knife hinge. It's called a knife hinge for obvious reasons. It opens like a pocket knife. And they're popular for small cabinets because in the finished work, you can hardly see it. You install one part in the cabinet and the other part is installed in the edge of the door. So in order to lay out where this hinge goes on the cabinet, I have to install this part in the cabinet base before the cabinet is assembled. And so I want to determine exactly where that needs to go. Take the door and line it up. So if I want this centered on the door, I would put it someplace about like that. If I want to make a little recess, a little gap between the door and the cabinet, which is good for clearance, I'll open that space up and I'll mark where this needs to go. And then I can mark. Also have to pay attention to how far it sticks out, because you see these holes can be hard to reach. They'll pivot out for putting in a screw, but I don't want it to where I can't get access to that with a screwdriver with having the top of the cabinet in the way. So I have to be careful about how far that goes out. So I want to get it someplace around in that area so that as this pivots out, I'll be able to get a screwdriver in to install the screw from the top into the door. My router travel will be from this line to this edge. And I set the fence so it rides on this edge and the router bit cuts right there to right there. So this is a 5/16 inch router bit. And it has a single flute. Some of them have two, but this is designed to route 5/16 inch diameter. So I have to set the router bit depth so it equals the thickness of the hinge. I'll route at each corner of this cabinet because it has 4 hinges, one at each corner. So I can measure here to determine how far to set the fence from the front edge of the cabinet. After I get it locked down, I'll make a test cut just to be sure that I've got it. Perfect. So I have to mark each of them, and I want it to lay in just like that. I can always make that line a little longer if I need to, but I can't cut it shorter. And I'll do the same each on the top and bottom at each corner. So I want to get this clamped firmly to the workbench. I'll clamp this down, and then I'm going to clamp another block here on the back side so it won't move. This will get chiseled to fit. So I have a 1/4 inch chisel that I'm using to cut and square the corners. I'll make that cut on each side. I'll clean it up with a longer straight chisel. And I do this for each corner to get a final fit. Now I want to check the relationship between the knife hinge that I just installed in the bottom and the fit of the side. So I can slide this in place. I'll put this on here, and then I can check with my door to see that everything's going to work just right. Looks good. Now I'm ready to assemble the top and bottom, back and sides. A knife hinge consists of two parts. One is simply a flat piece of brass with countersunk holes and a hole drilled in it. The other has a barrel and a little spacer, and that little spacer is designed to create a little lift between the door and the cabinet so that there's some clearance as it opens and closes. And you can see the little spacer here. Ideally, the door should be centered between this one and there's a matching spacer down below. So if I'm real tight on my tolerances in the doors, I may set this all the way in. If I'm not so tight, I have a little space to fill, I can route so that this doesn't go quite as deep. I'll take a measurement from the front edge of the door to the hinge, and so if I make it 3/16 of an inch, it will actually leave a very slight space between the side of the cabinet and the back of the door. So I'm going to set my router to cut 3/16 of an inch away from the fence. The first thing I'll do is I'll cut a story stick that will help me to exactly visualize how the door will fit. If I take a piece of wood, okay, so I've got this lined up on the edge and I'm marking here where the back side of the hinge fits. I'm going to take a square and mark along that line. On the router table, I have the router bit raised higher than I want it for installing the hinge. If I put this in here, I can observe the amount of space that I'm leaving between the door and the side of the cabinet. You can also see that I have the door lined up, and you can see, you should be able to see the very end of the hinge where it's going to fit. The next thing I need to do is set the height for fitting the hinge, and I'm going a little bit below, so I'll fill up more of that clearance. So this is my story stick. It slides in here. I make sure that the router bit is at its widest point. I'll put a stop block on. The first one I'll cut will be my upper right. Now I'll do my lower left. And now I'm going to reverse the position of my stop block. So I position the router bit going that way, story stick that way, and the stop block here. So now I'm going to drop it down this way over the router bit, very carefully. I still have some chiseling to do. Add that in till it stops. And that's the way it works. My strategy is this. I screw these in at all four corners, the part that has the barrel. Then I'll screw these in at the two corners of each door, top and bottom corners of each door. And then I'll take one of them off of each door, which will allow me to put the door in place, set it down over one of these, swing it around and slide the top piece in and put the screws back in. There's a distinct advantage to drilling your screw holes before the cabinet is assembled. In the event that you don't, if you forget, as I did, there's still a fix. You need a flexible shaft for your drill because the drill by itself won't go into that area. I have all my hinge parts in and installed, screwed in place, with the exception of the top. On the top, I've pre-drilled my holes, I've tested the fit. Slide that in place. Now at the top of the cabinet, I slide a leaf of the hinge in place, holding it angled out. I can slide my door in place, and I'll start putting a screw in. I want to finish the fitting of the doors first, then I can I can easily remove the doors and do the finish work on it. And with this cabinet, I'm installing glass, so I want to have all the finish work before the door is finally installed.